First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
The Insurrection Act of 1807, which would allow for him to call up the active duty U.S. military for use on U.S. soil against Americans without the permission of state governors.
I agree, we need to dominate the battle space. I think the sooner that you mass and dominate the battle space, the quicker this dissipates and we can get back to the right normal.
Dominate the battle space. We need to dominate the battle space.
So he put, now we understand, Attorney General Barr in charge of what could only be described as a conglomerate of federal forces and prison officers to be a secret police force to do the dirty work that the armed forces of the United States won't do.
Unfortunately, with the rioting that is occurring in many of our cities around the country, the voices of peaceful protest are being hijacked by violent radical elements. Groups of outside radicals and agitators are exploiting the situation to pursue their own separate and violent agenda. In many places, it appears the violence is planned, organized, and driven by anarchic and left extremist groups, far left extremist groups, using Antifa-like tactics, many of whom travel from outside the state to promote the violence.
What do that for?
Maybe they don't like him, the human being.
While Attorney General Barr singled out the anti-fascist movement known as Antifa, he provided no evidence of wrongdoing by the anti-fascist activists. This comes as The Nation magazine has obtained an internal FBI document that shows the agency had, quote, no intelligence indicating Antifa involvement, presence at protests in Washington last Sunday. But the document did cite the presence of, quote, far-right provocateurs.
These officers are federal law enforcement of some variety. I would love to tell you more, but they're not wearing any identifying badges, insignias, nameplates. They won't tell me where they're from or who they're with.
If these are just randomly unidentifiable people with no names and no agencies associated with them, what do you do if they violate your rights or hurt you? How do you know who did it? How do you know who issued their orders? But the other, and honestly darker prospect here, even darker than apparently federal law enforcement being deployed in this fashion against Americans in American streets. The even darker prospect here is this. I mean, who's to say these guys are law enforcement? What's to distinguish these unidentified, supposedly federal forces from random, self-motivated guys with guns who want to come down to these protests and play civil war as private citizens?
We want them to hear the truth tonight. We are here.
I think now that the police have arrived, that there is going to be certainly a change. And here come the police.
I think it will turn out to be important for history that the president has not acted alone here in turning the U.S. military against the American people. It will turn out to be important that it was the Attorney General who walked over to Lafayette Park to review the situation and then apparently personally ordered the assault on the peaceful protesters there so the president could go do a photo op on the other side of the park.
The man carrying out Trump's revenge campaign against his own agency and the FBI, William Barr, spoke gleefully about the way history will document him.
When history looks back on this decision, how do you think it will be written?
Well, history is written by the winners, so it largely depends on who's writing the history.
Okay, history is written by the winners if you are a lying, dictatorial, propagandistic, authoritarian, thug-like government, okay? In a democracy, history is written by the people. Speaking of history, we got a little bit for you right here. We're going to show you a little clip from A.G. Barr on his first term, letting BCCI off of the hook. Check it.
This action successfully resolved all United States charges against BCCI as an institution.
It was a high-profile affair. The new Attorney General, surrounded by the heads of virtually every law enforcement agency that had anything to do with the BCCI probe. The deal precludes any future criminal prosecution of the bank.
Yeah, there was a pretty sweet deal for the bad guys by the Justice Department under Attorney General Barr.
I think that the only thing that works with this Justice Department is force, and that it will take an independent counsel because the department is institutionally corrupted.
Inslaw and others claim the alleged software theft is part of a broad criminal conspiracy involving Justice Department officials, spies, money launderers, and drug dealers. Committee investigators say more investigation is needed to resolve disturbing questions and unexplained coincidences.
Danny Casolaro was adding up scandal after scandal. The Iran-Contra affair, the BCCI collapse, defense procurement fraud, and allegations relating to the delayed release of U.S. hostages in 1980 and the alleged government theft of computer software from a company called Inslaw.
Danny's friends say he came to this West Virginia hotel to meet with one or more informants, secret sources who would slip him the final pieces of a puzzle. Only this puzzle was no game. According to Danny Casolaro, it was part of a huge real-life conspiracy involving high government officials and their cronies. If exposed, heads would roll. Unfortunately, Danny Casolaro died before his story could be told.
Well, the investigation continues by the authorities and Inside Edition, and we will let you know what happens in this very disturbing case.
In the Inslaw case, the slime is already on the record. Barr has been a justice official since 1989, the #2 man since May of '90, and the acting chief since August. And that certainly connects him to both cases. But only yesterday, under questioning by the Senate Judiciary Committee, did he concede that suspicions of wrongdoing by justice on BCCI must be pursued. And today, finally, he orders what he calls a top-to-bottom review of the Inslaw case, a case that, as we have reported here on Moneyline, has smelled to high heaven for years. Why has he waited so long? And why should the Senate be in any rush to confirm him while these questions are unresolved? It isn't enough that Barr is a well-liked, hard-working bureaucrat who has made few enemies in the 14 years since he graduated from law school. Until we know whether the Justice Department has been tainted during at least a part of his watch, he should not be confirmed. And the Judiciary Committee should have the guts to pursue the issue more vigorously than the Justice Department has pursued the BCCI case.
Lou, you've been following this story for some time. The case has gone on in the courts for almost a decade.
And the final decision rests with Attorney General William Barr. Casey Wyan, CNN Business News.
But U.S. Attorney General William Barr rejected the request, saying there's no hard evidence of wrongdoing. That prompted accusations of a cover-up.
How did it go on that this situation wasn't uncovered? Where were the regulators? Where was the process? I mean, there were allegations a year ago. We talked on this program that there were bribes being made to U.S. members of politicians, and now we know the indictment says there were bribes all over the world, worldwide. They were bribing heads of state and government.
Yeah, well, who's writing your history now? We got your history right here. I tell you what, when history is written by the winners, that means there's some kind of authoritarian, dictatorial, propagandistic, dirtbag government lying to you, okay? Because in a democracy, The people write the history truthfully. All right, got your attention now, don't I? So anyway, if you want to see more, and I know you do, you gotta go click that donate button. Get me some money, because I need a crew. I need a better set. I need more time. I'm busy working and stuff, but this is gonna be the most awesome show ever in history. And if you donate some money to me, I will put you in the show. So come on, pony up some dough, and we'll get this show on the road.
The White House announced that the deficits would climb to $9 trillion over the next 10 years, bringing the national debt to $20 trillion a decade from now. The government also announced Social Security recipients will get no cost of living adjustments for the next 2 years. That hasn't happened since automatic increases were put into place in 1975. We can find hundreds of billions of dollars for AIG and Wall Street, but we cannot give our senior citizens a small cost of living increase in their Social Security. When does the revolution start? We're in the midst of a recession not seen since the Great Depression. Millions of Americans are out of work. Unemployment's hit 9.4%. Millions of good-paying jobs have been shipped overseas, never to return. And the manufacturing base that was once the engine of our economy is on life support. We simply don't make things anymore in this country. We're in debt up to our eyeballs to China and other foreign countries as we increasingly look to them to finance our deficit spending. And through it all, have you noticed? There is no talk in Washington of cutting expenses or reducing the size of the federal government. There are unfunded liabilities in the tens of trillions of dollars for Medicare and Social Security, no plan for how to pay for health care reform, add in the drain of millions of illegal aliens and the fact that many states as well are bankrupt. We're in some serious trouble here.
What do you make of this move by the Kuwaitis, the Saudis, Singapore, to come in and invest billions of dollars in Citicorp and some of these other
Thank God that we've sent all this money over there so we can get some of it back. You know, the idiots like Henry Paulson and all the geniuses down the road here on Manhattan Island in Wall Street who made billions of dollars in bonuses following policies that have bankrupted American manufacturing, and they have the Chamber of Commerce sitting there talking about what brilliant geniuses they are and how many more bonuses. Meanwhile, without that Kuwaiti money, without that Saudi money, we wouldn't have a balance sheet for Citigroup, the country's largest bank. That's how much trouble we're in, and people have got to start focusing on it, even if the candidates don't.
So when you allow yourself to talk about politics in the workplace, you can very easily make secret enemies that you need for your career success.
If half of the things a friend told me were misleading, that person wouldn't be very trustworthy as a friend, but that person could be a president.
That's correct.
That's crazy.
Well,
you're saying that's the way it is.
Well, so I guess I have a very low baseline, a very low set of expectations for our species.
Does it mean that we don't have the ability to really separate fact from fiction?
No, it means the campaigns don't care. They have their own distribution networks right now with social media.
But people like lies?
People like to believe what they like to believe. And that's what they want to retweet, and that's what they want to repost.
There's certain code phrases that journalists use. The government claims, the government alleges. And you have a responsibility to those viewers, listeners, and readers to point out possible contradictions.
The truth! You can't handle the truth!
Our middle class is under attack, and there's a new warning that tens of millions more American jobs could be exported to cheap overseas labor markets.
Another example of how outsourcing, though a big boon in the corporate world, is a blow to the American worker.
There's an interesting level of Orwellian speak going on here, that what's good for moguls becomes good for consumers. What is clearly an effort to limit choice becomes pro-choice. The congressman was just talking about this as a blow for free speech. So I think everybody is saying, well, what's going on here? What are they talking about? And I think that's the point. This is all a lie. This is all an effort to create an environment which is good for someone other than the consumer. In this case, it's what's good for the very topmost people who run media companies.
Let me assure you The hard right no longer controls the Republican Party. It never did, and it never will, as long as I have any influence whatsoever.
Boy, the platform wouldn't say that. Wouldn't you think this is
Well, with all deference to the platform, once they're written, once they're approved, nobody really pays much attention to them.
We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
You have everything. You have the whole goddamn thing.
Well, what are they going to do? Fine us? Big deal. We've got the most watched show on air.
This is dead air, Barry. Dead air.
Is Gary Webb in the house? Is the first thing I want to ask. Is Gary Webb in here? Gary Webb is the reporter for the San Jose Mercury News who broke the story wide open.
The stories generally talk about the relationship of the various members of this drug ring to the U.S. government and their relationship with various government agents.
The tragedy was that the mainstream news organizations that had dismissed the story in the 80s would not face up to this reality when it was even admitted to by the Central Intelligence Agency. We saw a complete failure, perhaps one of the most shameful examples of how the mainstream press can operate in destroying a fellow journalist for getting at an important story.
I mean, this was such an emotionally charged story, and it created such a widespread uproar that any sort of hint that we don't have faith in this thing just gives the people who want to bury this story, an opportunity to do it. And if you see from the New York Times and the Washington Post, this is what they're trying to do.
Your thing and my thing. Are they connected?
Are they the same?
Yes. They are the same.
In today's
The stock market got off to an impressive start. The stock market set another record today for the record books on Wall Street.
The U.S.
economy charges ahead, and so do the bulls on Wall Street. It was a big day on Wall Street. The S&P 500 has raced out to new all-time.
And as the stock market has grown, so have CEO paychecks. In 1973, the average CEO made about 22 times more than the average worker. By 2016, it was 271 times more. And as the stock market has grown bigger, fewer Americans have benefited. The share of Americans invested in the stock market is at its lowest point in 20 years, as the middle class dropped out. So it's no surprise that as stock prices have gone up in the United States, so has inequality. But it doesn't have to be this way.
No, you gotta listen to me. I thought you boys understood. It's business. That's all it is. You still don't get it, do you, boys? There ain't no countries anymore. No more good guys. They're running the whole show. They own everything, the whole goddamn planet. They can do whatever they want. What's wrong with having it good for a change? Now, they're gonna let us have it good if we just help them. They're gonna leave us alone. Let us make some money. You can have a little taste of that good life, too. Now, I know you want it. Hell, everybody does.
Why are we more outraged over what happened a decade ago than we are over what is happening right before our eyes? And consider this. If we really believe that our government would think so little of us to try to kill us with crack, what makes us think that same government wants to save us now? Wake up, people.
Wake up, America! Wake up, America! Wake up, America!
This is the machine which you have built, upon which we stand, will bring an end to the Senate, to their cherished fleet. All remaining systems will bow to the first order, and will remember this as the last day of the Republic.
That the House is doing a study of these big tech companies and the antitrust laws and looking at whether the laws as they stand now can deal with the power of big tech and the digital economy.
And Jennifer, in your really smart research, you mentioned ongoing government investigations in some or all parts of Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple. I know this is a pretty difficult question, but of those, who is at most risk here for being found to be liable, for example, in an antitrust suit?
The violent men are wrong. We'll remain strong and proud, peaceful and patient. And we will see a day when on this earth, all men will walk out of the long tunnels of tyranny into the bright sunshine of freedom.